I had boarded it with hope, but hope faded the moment I stepped inside the compartment. Every seat was taken. People were sitting shoulder to shoulder, bags squeezed between legs, some even sitting on the floor near the doors. The air was thick, heavy with sweat, voices, and impatience. I stood there, holding the metal bar above my head, my body tired from the long day. The train jerked slightly as if mocking me. You thought this would be easy? I took a deep breath and looked around. I wasn't looking for comfort anymore. Just space. Just a place to exist without apologizing. That's when I saw him. He was sitting by the window, calm in a way that felt unreal in that chaos. His hair was white, not messy, not neglected, but neatly combed back. His face carried lines of age, but also of patience. He wasn't scrolling through a phone or arguing with anyone. He was simply present. Our eyes met briefly. I looked away first. A moment later, I heard his voice. Beta at Hare-jo. I turned, surprised. He was looking at me. Yahan Beit-jo, he said gently, patting the empty space beside him, space that didn't really exist. I hesitated. There's no space, Uncle, I said politely. He smiled, a soft smile that didn't feel forced. Safar main Jagaban Jadi Hai, he replied. Something in his voice settled my hesitation. I nodded and carefully moved toward him. I sat beside him, half on the seat, half unsure, trying not to disturb him. I hope I'm not bothering you, I said. He shook his head. Insan se perishani nai hodi, he said. Kali panasi hodi hai. The train started moving, slowly, then faster. The station disappeared, replaced by darkness and distant lights. For a while we sat in silence. Not the awkward kind, the comfortable kind. Then he turned his head slightly toward me. Tamaranam kia hai? He asked. I told him my name. He repeated it quietly, as if memorizing it. Ekanam hai, he said. Then he told me his name. His voice was calm, measured. There was no hurry in him, like someone who had already learned that rushing changes nothing. We spoke about simple things. Where I was going, where he was coming from, how long the journey would be. He didn't ask why I was traveling alone. I didn't ask why he was. Somehow, that felt respectful. As the train moved deeper into the night, the noise slowly softened. People adjusted themselves, conversations faded, lights dimmed. My body began to feel heavy. I had not slept properly the night before. The rhythmic sound of the train, the warmth of the crowded compartment, all worked like a lullaby. I tried to stay awake. I didn't want to be rude. But tiredness doesn't ask permission. Slowly, without realizing it, my head tilted and rested on his shoulder. For a second, I panicked awake. Oh, I'm sorry, I whispered, trying to pull back. He didn't move. It's okay, he said softly. Safar Lambahai. His shoulder was firm, warm, not tense, not uncomfortable. He didn't stiffen or pull away like most people would. So I stayed. My head rested there again, this time without fear. My breathing slowed. My thoughts blurred. The world narrowed to the steady motion of the train and the quiet presence beside me. I slept deeply. When I woke up, I didn't know how much time had passed. The lights were dim now. Most passengers were asleep. The noise had turned into a low hum. My head was still on his shoulder. He was awake, looking out of the window. Moonlight fell across his face, highlighting the lines around his eyes. He looked thoughtful, peaceful. I pulled away gently, embarrassed. I'm really sorry, I said again. He turned toward me. Tum so hu bohat shayant lagho, he said quietly. Jays denaya si thorider kalia dorchail geho. No one had ever spoken to me like that. I didn't know what to say. We talked again, this time not about destinations, but about feelings, about how nights on trains made people honest, about how loneliness can exist even in crowds. He spoke slowly, carefully, like someone who chooses words the way others choose memories. I found myself listening more than speaking. At one point, he looked at me and said, Zindagi main kuch rishte surf safar kaliod hain, lekanunka sar puri zindagi redahai. I felt something shift inside me. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't crossing any line. Yet there was an intimacy in his words. a quiet understanding. When my station approached, the train slowed. My heart did something strange. It felt heavier. "This is my stop," I said softly. He nodded. "Apna Kyle Rachna," he said. I stood up, picked my bag, then hesitated. "Thank you," I said, "for letting me sit." He smiled. "Tumhain Baith and Kiajazat Nahi D," he replied. "Tumhain Jaga D." I stepped off the train. The doors closed, and as the train disappeared into the darkness, I realized something I couldn't yet explain. The platform was colder than I expected. Had not just been a seat. As soon as my feet touched the ground, of something unnamed, the noise of the train faded, but the warmth I felt beside him didn't. I stood there for a moment, watching the red lights at the end of the train disappear into the darkness. People rushed past me. Porters shouted. Somewhere, tea was being poured into small glasses. Life moved on, but something inside me stayed seated on that train. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the memory of his shoulder, steady, patient, unafraid. I replayed his words again and again, not because they were dramatic, but because they were gentle, honest. Tumhain Jagadi. No one had ever said something like that to me. I told myself it was nothing, just a stranger, just a journey. But the heart doesn't listen to logic when it recognizes something familiar. Days passed, yet the memory didn't fade the way most train encounters do. Usually, faces blur, voices dissolve. But his presence stayed sharp, like a bookmark of my life. I wondered about him, where he was now, whether he had reached safely, whether he ever thought about the young man who had slept on his shoulder without asking. I didn't even know why I wanted to know. A week later, I found myself on another train. Different route, different destination. Same chaos. I stood again, holding a metal bar, my body swaying with the movement. This time, I wasn't tired in the same way, but my heart was restless. And then, impossibly, I saw him. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, it was him. Same silver hair, same calm posture, same window seat. My breath caught. Before I could decide whether to move or stay still, his eyes lifted. They met mine, and his face changed. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition. A smile slowly formed on his lips, soft, real, unmistakable. "Tum," he said. I stepped closer, my voice almost shaking. "Uncle," he laughed quietly. "Lagda hai safar keobi ada hogai hai," he said. "Dabera miladia." This time, I didn't hesitate. I sat beside him. No apologies, no awkwardness, just presence. The train began to move. For a while, neither of us spoke. But this silence was different from the first time. It was fuller, like a shared secret. "You look different," he said finally. "How?" I asked. "Zayada Kili Hugh," he replied. "Jay's Kuchboj Halkaho Gayaho." I didn't know how he could see that. Or maybe I did. "I thought about you," I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. He didn't look shocked. "So did I," he said simply. My heart skipped. He turned toward the window, then back at me. "Is Umar Mainlog Axar Invisible Ho Jadhain," he said. "Magar Tum Mui Deka." I swallowed. "I felt seen too," I replied. The words hung between us, fragile, truthful. As the journey continued, our conversation deepened. We spoke about time, how it rushes past when you're young and becomes heavier when you're old. He told me about a love he once had, long ago, hidden and unspoken. "Uswak the Nayet ni Maherban Nahiti," he said quietly. I understood without needing details. I told him about myself, about the parts of me I keep folded away in public, about the quiet loneliness that comes from pretending too often. He listened, really listened. No judgment, no advice, just understanding. At one point, the train shook violently, and instinctively his hand moved, resting briefly over mine. He froze. I felt the warmth of his skin, the hesitation in his fingers. He didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. Slowly, carefully, our fingers intertwined, not tightly, not possessively, just enough to acknowledge what we both felt. The world outside rushed by. Inside, everything slowed. Later, exhaustion returned. But this time, when my head leaned toward him, I didn't apologize. He adjusted slightly, making space. Is Barbie? He asked gently. I smiled, closing my eyes. Surf Agar Apko Koye Trasnaho. Bilkul Nai, he said. My head rested on his shoulder again. But this time, I wasn't just sleeping. I was trusting. When dawn began to break, pale light filling the compartment, I woke to find him watching me. Tumri Ankin Suba Mainzayata Gary Lagdihane, he said. I laughed softly, embarrassed. AAPB, I replied. We knew this couldn't be simple. We knew the world outside this train wasn't as kind as the silence between us. Yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. When his station came, he stood slowly. The Safar Yan Kadam Hoda High, he said, echoing his earlier words. I felt the ache immediately. Fur, I asked. He looked at me, eyes warm, steady. Fur, Agar Kismat and Ichaha. He wrote something on a small piece of paper and pressed it into my hand. A phone number. Surf Agar Tumhain Lajki Safar Yan Kadam Nai Honachai, he said. I nodded, unable to speak. As he stepped off the train, he turned back once, and for the first time, he didn't just smile. He looked hopeful. The paper felt heavier than it should have. A small, folded square resting in my palm, his handwriting neat, careful, deliberate. I didn't open it immediately. I was afraid that once I did, the moment would become real, and real things can be lost. The train moved again. The seat beside me was empty now, but it didn't feel vacant. It felt remembered, as if his presence had soaked into the fabric. Lingering like warmth after someone stands up, I stare at the window, watching the morning unfold. Fields waking up, birds cutting through pale light, villages stretching and yawning into the day. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it, not because I wasn't ready to call him, but because I wanted to choose the moment. That evening, alone in my room, I finally unfolded the paper. His number, nothing else. No name, no message, just trust. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering. My heart beat louder than the ceiling fan. Questions rushed in. What if he doesn't answer? What if he regrets giving it to me? What if this was only meant for the train and nothing more? I closed my eyes and pressed call. It rang twice. Then, hello. His voice. Steady, calm, familiar. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It's me, I said softly. From the train. There was a pause. Then a smile I could hear. I was wondering when you'd call, he said. My chest tightened. I didn't want to rush, I replied. Neither did I, he said. But I hoped. That word again. Hope. We talked for hours that night. Not about love. Not about labels. We spoke about evenings that feel longer when you're alone. About the strange intimacy of voices when you can't see faces. About how some connections don't need explanation. At one point, he said, Tum Jani Ho, main Tumri Awaz Khan Azarkar Rahada. I swallowed. I didn't think you would. I admitted. He laughed quietly. Is Umar main logs ayata Yumid Nahi Rakti, he said. Lekin Furby Rockly. Days turned into a pattern. Calls in the evening. Messages at night. Nothing excessive. Nothing desperate. Just consistency. He never asked where I was going or who I was with. He never demanded attention. But somehow, he always felt present, like a lamp left on in another room. Sometimes there would be silence on the call, and it wouldn't feel awkward. It would feel shared. One night, after a long pause, he said something that made my heart stop. Tumhain Parahai, Jab Tumir Kane Parso Raithe, he said slowly. Mui Lagawak Rider Kalia Rukgaya Hai? I didn't reply immediately, and I asked carefully. And Mui Dar Laga, he continued. Is Lianai Katum Paste? Balke is Lieka Mui ACHA Laga. My fingers tightened around the phone. I felt it too. I confessed. And I don't know what to do with it. He exhaled softly. Hum koi faisla nahi kar rahi, he said. Surf messes kar rahi hain. That felt safe. Weeks passed. We began to know each other in quiet ways. His habit of waking up before sunrise, my tendency to overthink late at night. He told me about his past without bitterness, about loving someone once, deeply, and losing him to fear. I didn't fight, he said. Main chup raha. I understood that kind of silence. You're not silent anymore, I said. Tumari waja se, he replied. One evening, he surprised me. I'll be in your city next week, he said casually. My heart skipped. For work? No, he said. For coffee. I laughed nervously. That's a long way for coffee. Zindagi main kuch safar surf bano kaliod hain, he replied. I agreed to meet him. After the call ended, I sat there, staring at the wall. The train had brought us together. Distance had tested us. Now reality was approaching, and I wasn't sure whether I was more excited or more afraid. The cafe was quieter than I expected. Soft music played in the background, something slow, almost shy. Sunlight filtered through the glass windows, landing gently on empty chairs and half-filled cups. I arrived 10 minutes early, my hands already restless, my heart doing that strange thing it had learned to do ever since he entered my life. I chose a table near the window. Of course I did. I kept checking my phone, though there were no new messages. I didn't want him to think I was nervous, but I was. I had met him twice before, both times on a moving train, surrounded by strangers, protected by motion. This time, there was no crowd to hide us, no journey to excuse closeness. This time it was real. The bell above the door rang softly. I looked up, and there he was. For a moment, everything else disappeared. He looked the same, and yet different. His hair was still silver, but now I noticed how carefully he had styled it. He wore a simple shirt, neatly pressed. Nothing flashy, nothing forced. But his eyes, they softened the moment they found me. He smiled, not the polite smile of a stranger, not the careful smile of the train. This one was warmer, familiar. He walked toward me slowly, as if he didn't want to rush the moment. Tum Pellier gay, he said. So did you. I replied, standing up. For a second, we didn't know what to do. Handshake? Hug? Nothing? Then he opened his arms slightly, not demanding, just offering. I stepped forward. The hug was brief, gentle, respectful, but my heart reacted like it had been waiting for this exact moment. We sat down. Coffee was ordered. For a few minutes, we talked about small things, the weather, the city, how busy the cafe was getting. But beneath the normal conversation, something else flowed quietly. Awareness. Every time our hands moved on the table, every time our eyes held for a second too long. You look calmer, he said finally. So do you? I replied, different from the train. He smiled. On the train, I was borrowing courage from movement, he said. Here I have to find my own. That honesty touched me. I was scared you might change your mind. I admitted. About meeting? He asked. About me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me carefully, like someone reading a familiar page again. I didn't come for curiosity, he said. I came because I missed you. The words settled between us. Missed. I felt my chest tighten. Time passed faster than it should have. Coffee cups emptied. Sunlight shifted. Conversations deepened naturally. No effort, no pretending. We spoke about books, music, the quiet kind of happiness that doesn't announce itself. At one point, he said softly, Tumhain Padahai, main tumzi kuchumi nahi rakta. I frowned. That sounds sad. He shook his head. Nahi, he said, is kam matlab hai, kajo kuchbi milta hai, wo tofahoda hai. I understood. That was how he loved, without possession. When we finally stood to leave, neither of us rushed toward the door. Outside, the street was alive. Cars passed. People laughed. Life continued, unaware of the fragile thing forming between us. I should go, I said reluctantly. Yes, he agreed. But... He paused. I'm glad the train brought us together, he said. But I'm happier it didn't keep us there. So was I. As we walked side by side for a short distance, our shoulders brushed, accidentally, Then intentionally, he didn't move away. Neither did I. At the corner where we had to part, he stopped. "This is where I turn," he said. I nodded. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Tamarasaf muya diladahai, ku abibikut shuruho saktahai." I looked at him. Even now. He met my gaze. Especially now. He didn't kiss me. Didn't touch my face. He simply squeezed my hand once and let go. As he walked away, I realized something important. The train had been the beginning. But this was the moment where choice began. After he walked away, I didn't move for a long time. People passed me on the sidewalk, brushing past like waves that didn't know I was standing still. Cars honked. A street vendor laughed loudly. Life continued at full volume. Inside me, everything was hushed. I replayed the moment again and again, not the hug, not the hand squeeze, but his words. Abibikut shiruho saktahai. Even now, those words were dangerous. Not because they promised too much, but because they opened a door I had spent years keeping shut. That night, his message came later than usual. "Did you reach home safely?" I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. "Yes." "Did you?" A pause. Then, "Yes." And, "I'm glad we met today." I typed, deleted, typed again. "So am I." Simple, safe, but my heart wanted to say more. The days that followed were different. Not louder, not dramatic, just heavier. Our calls became quieter, more thoughtful. There was laughter, yes, but also pauses that carried meaning. We were both aware now that something real existed between us. And real things demand answers. One evening, after a long silence on the call, he spoke. "Tum pershin lag rahi ho," he said gently. I hesitated. "Main sak rahahun," I admitted. "Kiss bear main. Hamar bear main." He didn't interrupt. "I don't know where this goes." I continued. "I don't know what people would say, or what I would say to myself." There it was, the fear. He breathed out slowly. "Tumhain lagdahai menya sabnahi sakta?" he asked. "I don't know." I replied honestly. "I think about it every day," he said. "Tumhari Umar, Mary Umar, Denaya, Saul, Nazarene." My chest tightened. "Then why continue?" I asked quietly. There was a pause long enough for my thoughts to spiral. Then he said, "Kayanke ruk janabi ekfais lahodahai." That hit me harder than any argument could have. I began noticing the small ways he respected my space. He never pressured me to meet again, never asked for promises, never crossed boundaries. Yet his presence was constant, steady like a low flame that doesn't flicker even in wind. One night, I finally asked a question that had been burning in me. "Do you ever feel guilty?" I asked. "For wanting this?" "No," he replied without hesitation. "Do you?" "Yes," I admitted. "Then that guilt deserves attention," he said softly, "not punishment." I didn't know how someone could be so gentle and so strong at the same time. We met again a week later. Not planned like before. Just a walk. No cafe. No destination. Just movement. Side by side, hands occasionally brushing. Not holding. Not yet. At one point, we stopped near a park bench. Children were playing nearby. An old couple sat feeding pigeons. He watched them quietly. "Love doesn't always look the same at every age," he said, "but it feels the same." I looked at him. "And what does it feel like?" I asked. He turned to me. "Like recognition," he said. "Like relief." My throat tightened. "I'm scared," I confessed, "that one day I'll wake up and choose the easier path." He nodded. "And I'm scared you'll resent choosing the harder one." That honesty made my eyes burn. He reached out then, not to pull me closer, but to rest his hand over mine, openly in daylight. People could see. He didn't flinch. "Whatever you choose," he said, "I want it to be because it's true to you." I squeezed his hand back. That small act felt heavier than any promise. That night, alone again, I lay awake thinking about desire, about time, about how love doesn't ask for permission. It only asks for courage. And I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't afraid of loving him. I was afraid of how much it mattered. It was raining that evening, not the dramatic kind, just a steady, patient rain that soaks into clothes and thoughts alike. I had called him without thinking, my voice quieter than usual. "I don't want to be alone tonight," I said. There was no question in my tone, just honesty. "I'll come," he replied, "if that's okay." When he arrived, we didn't hug right away. We stood there, rain dripping from his coat, the room filled with the sound of water hitting the window. "You can say no," he said gently. "Even now." I shook my head. "I don't want to." I replied, "I just don't know how." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll go slowly." We sat on opposite ends of the sofa at first. Tea warmed our hands. Silence settled. Not heavy, not awkward, just aware. Every movement felt deliberate, like the space between us was charged with meaning. "You're trembling," he noticed. "So are you," I replied. He didn't deny it. "I've crossed many borders in my life," he said quietly. "But this one, I don't want to cross without you." That was when I moved closer. Not all the way, just enough that our knees touched. Neither of us pulled back. The rain outside grew louder, as if the world was giving us privacy. I don't remember who reached out first, only that suddenly his hand was covering mine. Warm, familiar. This time, there was no hesitation. My breathing changed. "So this is what it feels like," he murmured, outside the train. I smiled. "Less movement," I said. "More weight." He nodded. "Yes," he agreed, "but steadier." We talked softly, about nothing important, about memories, about how strange it is to feel young and old at the same time. At some point, I leaned my head against his shoulder again, just like before. But this time we were choosing it. He shifted slightly, so I'd be more comfortable. "Tell me if it's too much," he said. "It's not," I replied. "It's enough." His arm rested around me, not pulling, not claiming, just present. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was borrowing comfort. I felt like I belonged in the moment. Later, when the rain softened and the night deepened, he stood to leave. "I don't want to rush what this becomes," he said. "I know," I replied. "Neither do I." At the door, he paused. Then, very gently, he pressed his forehead to mine. No kiss, just closeness. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me." "Thank you," I said, "for waiting." He left quietly, and when the door closed behind him, the room didn't feel empty. It felt opened. Something changed after that night. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a plant that starts growing without asking for permission. We didn't talk about what we were. There was no label, no definition. Instead, there was rhythm, morning messages that didn't demand replies, evening calls that didn't need reasons, shared silences that felt as meaningful as conversations. He became part of my days the way habits do, not loudly, but consistently, and that scared me. One afternoon, I caught myself smiling at my phone for no reason. I hadn't received a message. I was just thinking of him. That was when I realized this wasn't just comfort anymore. This was attachment. I told him that night, "I'm getting used to you," I said quietly, "and that makes me nervous." He smiled on the other end of the call. "Getting used to someone isn't the danger," he said. "Believing they'll never leave is." I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. "Do you believe that?" I asked. "I believe in honesty," he replied. "And honesty says everything that arrives can also go." That didn't feel cold. It felt real. We began sharing ordinary things. He would tell me what he cooked for dinner. I'd complain about work. Sometimes we'd stay on the call while doing nothing at all, just breathing into the same silence. One evening, he said, "Tumhain parahai, main peli dafa jishi kasa future, kaber me nahi sakraha." I turned onto my side. "Is that a good thing?" "Yes," he said. "It means I'm present." That word again. Present. We met more often, but never impulsively. Walks, tea stalls, bookshops, always in public, always respectful. And yet, intimacy grew in the smallest gestures. The way his hand would rest lightly on my back when crossing a road. The way he listened when I spoke, really listened. The way he remembered details I forgot I'd shared. Once, sitting on a park bench, I asked him something that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. Do you ever feel like you're holding me back? I asked, from something simpler? He looked at me for a long moment. Do you feel smaller with me? He asked. No, I replied immediately. Then I'm not holding you back, he said. I'm walking beside you. That answer stayed with me. Still, doubt didn't disappear. Some nights, I imagined futures where this couldn't exist, where society's weight became too heavy, where age turned from a number into a wall. I shared those fears with him. He didn't dismiss them. Fear doesn't mean stop, he said one night. It means slow down and look carefully. I realized then he wasn't teaching me how to love him. He was teaching me how to love honestly. One evening, as we sat together watching the city lights turn on, I leaned against him without thinking. He stiffened for a second, then relaxed. You okay? I asked. Yes, he said softly, just surprised. I smiled. Me too. He rested his head lightly against mine. No one around us noticed. Or maybe they did, and it didn't matter. In that moment, I understood something simple and powerful. We weren't trying to be brave. We were just being true. It began with looks, not sharp ones, not openly hostile, just pauses that lingered a second too long. A shopkeeper's eyes moving from me to him and back again. A waiter hesitating before asking, separate bills? A passerby slowing their step. Curiosity dressed up as coincidence. The world hadn't changed. It had just started paying attention. The first comment came from someone I didn't expect. A colleague, casual, careless. Your friend is older, he said, like it was an observation about the weather. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. He laughed lightly. Interesting choice. Choice. The word, follow me home. That night, on the call, I told him. He didn't react immediately. Then he said softly, does it bother you? I thought about it. The comment. I asked. No, he replied. The mirror holds up. I was quiet for a long moment. It bothers me that I hesitate. I admitted, not because of you, because of me. That honesty matters, he said, more than pretending it doesn't hurt. A few days later, we were walking together in a crowded market. It was busy, voices overlapping, colors everywhere, life unfolding loudly. At one point, someone brushed past me roughly, their shoulder knocking into mine. Before I could react, his hand was on my arm. Not tight, not dramatic, just grounding. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded, but I noticed something then. He didn't let go immediately, and he didn't look around to see who was watching. I felt a quiet warmth spread through my chest. Not pride, not defiance, safety. That evening, we sat on a bench, the city breathing around us. People will ask questions. I said. He nodded. They always do. Some of them won't be kind. I know. I looked at him. And you're still here. He smiled gently. Yes, he said. I am. There was no heroism in his tone. Just choice. Later that week, I introduced him to a friend, not as a statement, not as an announcement, just naturally. This is him, I said. My friend smiled politely, asked questions, listened. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't disaster either. When we left, my friend texted me. You look happy. That's what I noticed. I read the message twice, then showed it to him. He smiled, eyes soft. Sometimes, he said, that's all the explanation we need. Still, the pressure grew, not always from outside. Sometimes it came from within. One night, lying awake, I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. What if one day this becomes too heavy? I asked for either of us. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, then we'll put it down together, not throw it away. Tears burned behind my eyes. That's not a promise to stay forever, I said. No, he agreed. It's a promise to stay honest. That felt better than forever. The world continued to notice. But something else happened too. I noticed myself changing, standing straighter, apologizing less, choosing words that felt true instead of safe, and in quiet moments, walking beside him, listening to his breathing, feeling his presence, I realized we weren't hiding anymore. We were just living. Days turned into weeks. Weeks melted into months. Yet the quiet rhythm of our lives together remained the same. It wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't need grand declarations or public approval. It existed in small choices, the ones that felt heavier than any promise. Every morning, he would text me, sometimes just a single word. Good morning. I would reply, sometimes with a sentence, sometimes with nothing at all. The simplicity carried weight because it was consistent. We met in parks, cafes, and sometimes just sat on benches under streetlights. Each meeting wasn't about the grand gestures. It was about presence. His presence had become a constant, and I realized my days felt incomplete without it. One rainy evening, much like the first, we sat together on a bench, sharing an umbrella. The rain drummed softly against the fabric, and the city around us blurred into a watercolor of movement and light. You know, he said quietly, I don't need anyone to see us. I just need to see you. I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. The air between us didn't demand anything. It only invited, even if the world doesn't understand. I asked. He smiled faintly, eyes full of calm certainty. Even then, it's not about the world. It's about truth, about us being honest with ourselves. Our conversations grew deeper, moving from mundane topics to the quiet vulnerabilities we both carried. He told me about love he had lost long ago, not a fiery, dramatic love, but a gentle one that was quiet and patient, yet cut too short by fear. I've spent decades learning that life doesn't wait, he said softly. That waiting doesn't make it easier. It only makes regret heavier. I nodded, understanding too well the weight of patience, the ache of holding back feelings because the world demanded caution. One night, lying in the dark after a long call, I admitted my fear. I'm afraid this could end. That someday I'll wake up and it won't be the same. That one day I'll lose you, not because you want to leave, but because life just changes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, with a calm I had learned to trust, he said, and what if it does? We've had every moment, honestly. Every choice we've made together has been ours. Isn't that worth something? I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't a perfect reassurance. It wasn't a promise that the world would bend to us. But it was enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to choose him again. The months continued, filled with ordinary joys. Coffee shared silently on Sunday mornings. Books exchanged and discussed. Hand-holding when walking through crowds. Small touches that said, I'm here. I see you. I choose you. No one could see the depth of what was growing between us. But it didn't matter. What mattered was our understanding, our patience, our mutual care. Each time I leaned my head on his shoulder, each time he rested his hand over mine, it was a deliberate act of trust. It was love without demand, love without rush, love without labels. And slowly I realized what we had was rare, not because it was forbidden, not because it was unusual, but because it was honest, because we had chosen each other again and again, quietly, patiently, without any need for applause or validation. We weren't perfect. We weren't immune to doubt, but we were deliberate. And in that deliberation, I found safety and I found belonging. Every day when I looked at him, I saw not just a man beside me, but the choice I had made over and over again. And that, I realized, was the kind of the seasons change softly and without announcement. Rain turned to warm sunlight, and the sunlight faded into crisp evenings. Yet, the rhythm between us remained constant. Our connection had grown beyond the need for words. It existed in the small, deliberate moments. The way he adjusted his coat when I shivered, the way I remembered the exact brand of tea he preferred, the way our hands naturally found each other without thought. One afternoon, we walked through a quiet street lined with blooming trees. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting the pavement in golden patches. He stopped suddenly and turned to me, eyes reflective. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked. I paused. "Yes," I admitted, "but not the big, perfect future everyone talks about. Just this, us, how we move forward day by day." He nodded slowly. "I like that. A future without pressure. Just presence, choice, understanding." I smiled. "Exactly." He reached for my hand. This time, our fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always belonged that way. No hesitation, no fear, just trust. We spent evenings in quiet routines, sometimes reading side by side, sometimes cooking together, laughing over burnt food and spilled tea. Other times, we simply sat, sharing silence that felt richer than words. One night, lying together after a long day, he whispered, "I never imagined finding someone like this at my age." I tilted my head to rest against his chest. "Neither did I, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that we did." He held me closer. "And we will, every day we choose to." Even the world's judgments became background noise. Comments, sideways glances, occasional whispers. They no longer frightened me. We had discovered that what truly mattered wasn't approval, but honesty. We had chosen each other, quietly, repeatedly, and that choice was enough. Every morning I woke up, I realized again that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about labels or timing. It was about patience, trust, and the courage to keep choosing the same person every day. We never needed declarations, only acknowledgement. Every touch, every shared glance, every gentle word became our vow. And in that simplicity, we found permanence. Years later, when I thought back to that first train ride, to the shoulder I had rested on and the warmth I'd felt, I understood something profoundly simple. Love sometimes arrives quietly, without demands, without drama. It arrives in a seat beside a stranger, in shared silences, in repeated choices, and in the courage to stay honest to oneself and to another. We had found our love, not in the grand gestures, not in fleeting passion, but in quiet, steady presence. And that, I realized, was everything. By now, we had grown accustomed to each other's presence in ways words could not capture. Our love had evolved into a quiet language, a glance across a crowded room, a subtle squeeze of the hand, the way he would tilt his head slightly when he wanted me to notice something without saying it aloud. One evening, as we walked along a riverside path, he stopped and looked at the water reflecting the city lights. The ripples glimmered in gold and silver, like scattered stars. "Do you ever think about how life brings people together?" he asked. I smiled softly. "I do. And I think it's strange that sometimes the most important people enter your life when you least expect them." He nodded. "I didn't expect this either. Not at my age. But I am grateful." We continued walking, shoulders brushing occasionally. Silence surrounded us, but it was comforting, not empty. That night, we sat at his apartment. He made tea, and we shared it without speaking for a while, just listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. Then he reached for my hand. "I like this," he said softly. "The quiet moments where nothing has to be proven." "I like it too," I replied. "It feels safe." He nodded. Safety isn't always about walls. Sometimes it's about the person you choose to sit next to, someone who stays even when the world judges. His words settled over me like a warm blanket. It wasn't about passion or excitement. It was about belonging, about finding a space where my heart could breathe freely. Days passed, and we developed small rituals that became our anchor. He would always check in when I was busy at work. I would send him photos of things that made me think of him. On weekends, we'd explore quiet corners of the city, return to familiar cafes, bookstores, and parks. Every choice, every shared moment reinforced a quiet truth between us. We were committed to each other, not through formal promises, but through repeated, deliberate acts of care. One rainy afternoon, while watching droplets race down the window, I asked him something that had been on my mind. "Do you ever regret any part of this?" He looked at me thoughtfully. "Regret? No, not once. This isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. And everything we've shared, every choice we've made has been true." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It was true. Our love wasn't perfect, and it didn't need to be. It was ours, carefully nurtured, quietly grown, and fiercely real. He reached out and rested his forehead against mine. "We'll continue choosing each other," he whispered. "I will," I replied, again and again. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just a promise. It was a way of life. One quiet evening, I noticed a subtle change in him, not in his words or gestures, but in the way he stared out the window, lost in thought. There was a shadow in his gaze, a weight he hadn't shared yet. "Are you thinking about something?" I asked softly, moving closer. He shook his head, forcing a small smile. "It's nothing, just memories." I didn't press him. I had learned that with him, patience revealed more than curiosity ever could. Later that night, after we had tea and the city lights dimmed behind the curtains, he finally spoke. "Do you want to know why I'm cautious?" he asked, voice low, almost hesitant. I nodded. "I do, but only if you're ready." He took a deep breath and began slowly. "I've loved before. Not casually, not fleetingly. Deeply. When I was much younger, I thought love was simple, like a song, predictable and sweet. But it wasn't. Life had intervened. Fear, pride, the world itself, it tore the connection apart." His eyes, usually so steady, flickered with emotion. I lost someone I truly cared for, because I didn't have the courage to fight for it. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I walked away when I should have stayed. And I promised myself I would never let that happen again. Not because I fear love, but because I fear losing it without honesty. I reached out, placing my hand over his. "You're not that person anymore," I whispered. He looked at me, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I hope not, but shadows linger. They remind me to tread carefully and to treasure what's real when I find it." That night, the weight between us shifted. Not heavier, but deeper. I understood that the patience he demanded wasn't distance. It was respect for the past and awareness of the present. "I'm glad you trust me enough to tell me this," I said. "And I'm glad you're here," he replied, "because it's easier to face the shadows with someone who chooses to stay, even when they see them." I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling the truth in his words. Love wasn't just about joy. It was also about understanding the scars, the memories, and the quiet fears that accompany a lifetime of experience. And in that understanding, I realized our bond wasn't fragile. It was deliberate, conscious, and resilient. Life is a way of reminding us that love, no matter how honest, exists within a world full of opinions. It started subtly. A neighbor's comment about how unusual our closeness seemed. A shopkeeper who asked him if I was really part of his life in a tone that suggested doubt. Even friends, once trusting and open, started offering cautious glances or awkward smiles. We never let it change the way we felt about each other, but the awareness pressed on us like a quiet weight. One evening, he came to my apartment after work. I noticed a faint tension in his shoulders, a stiffness he rarely carried. "What is it?" I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "People are talking," he said simply. I frowned. "About what?" "About us," he replied, eyes steady on mine. "About the age difference. About how unusual this is. About whether it will last." I took a deep breath. "And does that scare you?" He shook his head. "No, not really. But it's unavoidable. The world will always have opinions. We can't control that. We can only choose how we respond." The first real challenge came at a casual gathering with some of his friends. They were kind enough, polite, but the questions were sharp in their curiosity. "So, how did this happen?" one asked, a faint smile hiding judgment. He answered with calm precision. "Life happens, and sometimes it brings people together who appreciate each other. That's all there is to it." I felt my hand brushes under the table, a silent acknowledgement. We didn't need to defend ourselves with words. We chose to show unity through presence, through quiet strength. Later that night, alone in his apartment, he admitted the truth. "It's not the questions or the stares that trouble me," he said. "It's the thought that one day someone we care about will try to convince us that what we have is wrong." I looked at him. "But it isn't wrong." "I know that," he said. And that's why it matters. Because every choice we make in the face of judgment strengthens us. It tests our honesty, our courage, and our commitment to each other. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Then we keep choosing each other. I said, "Yes," he whispered, again and again. From that day, we became even more deliberate. We didn't hide. We didn't flaunt. We simply existed. Two people making the conscious choice to remain connected, grounded, and patient, no matter the outside pressures. Every hand held in public, every shared glance, every soft word became a statement. Not to the world, but to ourselves. That our love was real, that our bond was ours. And slowly, quietly, the outside pressure became less about fear and more about affirmation. Because each day, each choice reminded us, love isn't defined by the world. It's defined by the people brave enough to honor it honestly. We began carving out small adventures together. Not grand trips or exotic escapes, but little journeys that became ours. One weekend, we took an early morning train to a nearby town neither of us had visited. There was no rush, no schedule beyond catching the last train back. We wandered through narrow streets, sampling street food, stopping at quiet cafes, and watching children chase pigeons in the sun. At one point, he paused near a small bookshop and turned to me. "Do you want to go in?" he asked. I nodded. Inside, the scent of old paper and coffee filled the air. We browsed silently, occasionally pointing out a book or a photograph that caught our attention. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. He picked up a worn notebook and showed it to me. "This reminds me of someone," he said softly. "A long time ago." I looked at him, curious but respectful. He didn't explain further, but the gentleness in his tone said more than words ever could. We found a small park nearby, with a fountain and benches under flowering trees. We sat together, leaning close but not pressing for more than comfort. The world around us moved quickly, but in our little bubble, time seemed to stretch. "I like this," I said quietly. "Just wandering with no destination." He smiled. "Life doesn't always need a map. Sometimes it only needs presence." We shared sandwiches and sipped tea from a thermos he had brought. Occasionally, he would nudge me gently, or I would lean against him as if by habit. Every touch was deliberate enough to show trust, gentle enough to honor space. Even small moments became profound. On the train back, I rested my head on his shoulder once again. This time, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The rhythmic hum of the train, the fleeting landscapes outside, and the warmth of his body beside mine said everything. When we arrived at our station, he looked at me with quiet amusement. "Do you always fall asleep on trains?" he teased softly. I laughed. "Only when I feel safe." He squeezed my hand. "Then I'll take that as a compliment." In the following weeks, our quiet adventures became a cherished routine. We explored markets, parks, small galleries, and sometimes we simply walked for hours with no destination, sharing stories of childhood, past regrets, and fleeting joys. Each moment reinforced what we already knew. Love didn't need grandeur. It thrived in presence, patience, and the deliberate choice to care again and again. By the time the seasons began to shift, I realized something profound. Our love wasn't just a series of moments. It was a collection of shared experiences, stitched together with trust, patience, and quiet intimacy. And the more we explored, the deeper our bond grew. Even in a love built on patience and honesty, there are moments when boundaries are tested, not by malice, but by circumstance, curiosity, or fear. One afternoon, we decided to visit a museum. It was crowded, the kind of place where the presence of strangers pressed in from all sides. At first, we held hands lightly, our fingers brushing almost unconsciously. But soon, the crowd pushed us closer together, and I could feel his body tense subtly. "You okay?" I whispered. He gave a small nod. "Just aware." I understood immediately. Awareness was his way of protecting both of us. Not from each other, but from a world that didn't always understand. Later, while standing in front of an old painting, a curious visitor asked a question. "Are you together?" I felt my chest tighten. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. His gaze was calm, steady, I realized then that he was giving me the choice. Yes, I said softly, letting our hands meet fully, fingers entwined. His lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "Thank you," he whispered. The stranger moved on, but the moment lingered, not because of judgment, but because it reminded us of the courage required in honesty. That evening, back in his apartment, he spoke of the moment quietly. "Boundaries aren't just for others," he said. "They're for us too, to protect the rhythm we've built, to remind ourselves that closeness doesn't mean surrender." I listened, absorbing every word. It made sense. Love was not just passion. It was discipline, patience, and understanding. "I sometimes worry," I admitted, "that I might cross a line without realizing it." He reached for my hand. "Then we talk. Always. Communication is our boundary, and trust is the fence that keeps us safe." The days that followed, we continued testing the quiet edges of our intimacy, not recklessly, but deliberately. We lingered longer in each other's presence, explored deeper emotional vulnerability, and shared more than before. Every conversation, every touch, every choice became a lesson in trust. Every moment reminded us that love was not merely a feeling. It was practice. And slowly, I realized the depth of what we had, a love that could withstand external pressures, doubts, and the quiet anxieties that accompany desire. It was rare, deliberate, and steadfast. By the time the week ended, I understood something essential. Boundaries were not limitations. They were the invisible scaffolding that allowed our bond to grow safely, beautifully, and honestly. We had discovered not just each other, but a way to navigate the world together, side by side, without losing the integrity of what we were building. Trust deepened in ways neither of us could have anticipated. It wasn't in grand declarations or poetic words. It was in small, guarded moments when we chose to reveal pieces of ourselves that no one else had ever seen. One rainy evening, we sat on his balcony, the city lights reflecting off wet pavements. Steam rose from the cups of tea between us, curling like whispers of our thoughts. "I've never told anyone this," he said quietly, "not even my closest friends." I looked at him, curious but patient. "You can tell me." He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "When I was younger, I felt invisible. I thought that even when I loved, I wouldn't be seen. People left. People judged. And I built walls. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to protect myself." I reached for his hand. "You're seen now," I said softly. "By me. Completely." He exhaled, a mixture of relief and vulnerability. "I've never let anyone in like this before. You make it easy to breathe." Later that night, I shared a secret of my own, something I had kept tucked away for years. A memory, a fear, a fragment of my soul that I didn't trust the world with. He listened without interruption, absorbing each word. When I finished, he simply held my hand. "You're brave," he said softly, "to let me see you like that." "I had to," I replied, "because I trust you." It wasn't a dramatic confession. It wasn't a tearful revelation. It was quiet, deliberate, and complete. Over time, these shared secrets became the foundation of our intimacy. We learned the rhythm of each other's vulnerabilities, the subtle cues that indicated comfort or discomfort, the weight of memories carried silently. One afternoon, we were sitting in a small cafe, talking about nothing in particular, when he suddenly said, "Do you realize how rare this is?" I looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "This us, the honesty, the patience, the way we can be ourselves without fear." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. "I know, and I never want to change." He nodded, his eyes soft. "Then we'll protect it. Together." In those moments, I understood the true essence of love. Not passion, not urgency, not spectacle, but trust, honesty, presence, and the courage to reveal yourself fully, knowing the other will not flinch, judge, or abandon you. We had crossed so many boundaries, faced so many challenges, and yet, in sharing these secrets, we became stronger, not despite the world, but because we chose each other again and again. Our love had settled into a rhythm, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, enduring kind that only time and consistency could build. We discovered the beauty of ordinary life together, Early mornings became our small sanctuary. Sometimes we would sit in his kitchen, drinking tea in silence, listening to the distant hum of the city waking up. He would read the newspaper. I would scroll through emails, yet our hands often met on the table without any thought, fingers intertwining naturally. One Saturday, he suggested a routine we hadn't tried before, cooking breakfast together. "You chop, I stir?" he asked, playful. "Deal," I replied. We worked side by side, laughing at minor spills, teasing each other when pancakes stuck to the pan, sharing small victories when the eggs came out perfect. The kitchen smelled of butter, sugar, and warmth, and in those moments, I realized how much happiness could exist in simplicity. Evenings were for quiet walks. The city streets glowed under streetlights, and we moved slowly, hand in hand, taking in small details. The smell of rain on pavement, the laughter of children, the flickering neon signs above cafes. Sometimes we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The comfort of being together was enough. Other times, we shared thoughts and memories, stories of childhood, fears, and hopes, weaving a tapestry of understanding that deepened with every passing day. He also had a habit that made ordinary life extraordinary, leaving small notes for me. A single line on a scrap of paper, "Saw this and thought of you," or a simple "Don't forget to smile today." They became treasures, reminders of his presence even when he wasn't physically there. I started doing the same. A note tucked into his coat pocket, a message left on his desk, a small drawing on the back of a receipt. These small rituals didn't need grand gestures. They needed only honesty and thoughtfulness. One rainy evening, we stayed in and watched the city through the window. He rested his head against mine, and I let the warmth of his body fill the spaces in me that had once felt empty. "Life doesn't have to be extraordinary to be beautiful," he murmured. "No," I agreed. "It's the ordinary moments that matter most." He squeezed my hand gently. "Then let's never forget them." In our daily routines, we found love in its most natural form. It wasn't about dramatic declarations or milestones. It was about showing up, choosing each other in small ways, again and again, every single day. And in that consistency, our bond grew unshakable, quietly powerful, and enduring. Life, as gentle as it had been, finally nudged us with a subtle challenge. Not dramatic, not threatening, just enough to test the quiet strength we had built together. It began with a distant acquaintance of his, a colleague who had always admired him professionally. She had been kind and polite, but there was a warmth in her attention that made me pause. A few shared lunches, a message here and there, and suddenly I noticed the slight tension it caused in me. One evening, over tea, I brought it up cautiously. "Does she bother you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. He looked at me calmly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "She doesn't bother me," he said softly, "but I can see that it worries you." "It's not about her," I admitted. "It's about me, feeling uncertain, even for a second." He reached for my hand and held it firmly. "Good. That feeling is yours, not hers." It's a reminder that even love as quiet as ours requires trust and reassurance. It's normal, but remember, trust is a foundation. And I choose you. I felt my chest unclench, the tension melting in the warmth of his words. A few days later, we met at a cafe. I noticed a colleague sitting nearby, glancing subtly in our direction. Normally, it would have sparked irritation or jealousy. But now, I realized something remarkable. The challenge didn't come from others. It came from within me. I leaned over to him and whispered, "I see it now. It's not about anyone else. It's about how much I trust us." He smiled faintly. "Exactly. Every test we face only proves the strength of what we built. Not for the world, but for us." That evening, we walked slowly, hand in hand, the city quiet around us. "You know," he said softly, "life will always present moments like this. People, circumstances, whispers. It's inevitable." "I know," I replied, "but now I understand that I don't need to fear them, not when we face them together." He squeezed my hand, and I felt the weight of years, experience, and care in that simple gesture. It wasn't dramatic, but it carried a promise, presence, honesty, and choice. In the days that followed, The subtle challenge faded, but its lesson stayed with us. It reinforced what we already knew. Love wasn't immune to doubt or curiosity, but it could withstand them. Our bond was deliberate, chosen, and nurtured every day. We didn't need grand declarations to prove our connection. The smallest acts, holding hands in public, sharing a glance, choosing patience, were enough. And for the first time, I realized that challenges were not obstacles. They were mirrors, showing us the depth of our trust, the courage of our hearts, and the quiet power of choosing each other repeatedly. By now, our love had found a language that didn't require words. It was in the way his fingers brushed mine, the way our shoulders would occasionally touch as we walked, the soft glance across a crowded room that said, "I see you, only you." One evening, we were sitting in a small park. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying the distant laughter of children. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The world seemed to pause around us, leaving only the quiet rhythm of our breathing and the warmth of our closeness. I rested my head lightly against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath me. He didn't shift. He didn't move. He just let me be, as if he knew that presence itself was enough. Later, as the sky darkened and streetlights flickered on, he reached for my hand, not urgently, not dramatically, but naturally, like it was always meant to be there. I looked up at him, and our eyes met. In that gaze, there was understanding, trust, and a depth of feeling that words could never capture. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catch, but it was a good kind of tension, the kind that comes from being completely seen and accepted. He leaned his forehead against mine. No words, no promises, just closeness, just truth. Another day. We were cooking together, the kitchen filled with steam and the scent of spices. I glanced at him, noticing the slight crinkle near his eyes as he smiled while stirring a pot. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed his hand with mine. He paused, looked at me, and smiled. That small touch spoke volumes. Comfort, love, and a quiet affirmation of our bond. We laughed over spilled ingredients, nudged each other playfully, and yet every movement carried the weight of care and intention. Even ordinary activities became intimate. Sitting on a train, sharing an umbrella in the rain, reading side by side, all of it was imbued with unspoken affection. Sometimes a touch, a glance, or a shared smile conveyed more than any sentence could. I began to realize that love didn't always need to be declared. It didn't always need words. Sometimes it lived in the silence, in the patience, and in the deliberate choice to be present for each other. That night, lying together in his apartment, he whispered softly, "Every moment with you, it teaches me something. About patience, about trust, about honesty. And even without words, I feel it. I feel love." I pressed my hand against his chest. I feel it too, every day, in every quiet moment. And as we lay there, the city lights reflecting softly on the walls, I understood something profoundly simple. The deepest love is often the quietest. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, deliberate and enduring. By now, our love had settled into something steady and enduring. Not dramatic, not flashy, but deliberate, intentional, and quiet. Every day we built life together, not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent choices. Mornings were for tea and light conversation, sharing the mundane details of life, yet finding joy in each other's presence. He would pour my cup just the way I liked it, and I would leave little notes for him to find, small reminders of thoughtfulness that didn't need words. Weekends were for quiet adventures, visiting parks, exploring bookstores, wandering through markets. Nothing extravagant, nothing rushed. Just us, side by side, observing the world and savoring the comfort of togetherness. Even the challenges of life, work stress, societal judgment, unexpected errands, became easy to bear because we faced them together. When a problem arose, we spoke calmly, shared perspectives, and supported each other. There was no need to dramatize struggles or demand reassurance. Our love was already a steady current beneath every ripple. One rainy afternoon, we were walking home from a cafe when I slipped on the wet pavement. He caught me instinctively, his arm steady around me. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said, laughing nervously. "Thanks to you." He smiled, brushing a raindrop from my hair. "Always," he replied simply. We even developed our own private rituals. The way we made breakfast together on Sundays. The way he would hum quietly while reading a book. The way I would rest my head on his shoulder during movies, even when there was no dialogue. Each small act became part of the tapestry of our shared life. And in those moments, I realized something essential. Love isn't only in grand declarations or public acknowledgments. Love exists in the quiet, consistent acts of choosing each other every day, no matter the world outside. At night, lying together after a long day, we often spoke about our hopes. Not for distant adventures, but for a life full of these ordinary, cherished moments. "Do you think we'll always have this?" I asked softly, resting against his chest. "We'll have what we build," he replied, "and we've been building it well." His words sank deep into me. They weren't a promise of perfection, but a recognition that love is sustained by care, attention, and choice. And in that, I found security, joy, and belonging. By this point, I no longer worried about the world's opinions or the uncertainties of life. They existed, yes, but they no longer mattered. What mattered was the life we were creating together, piece by piece, day by day, hand in hand, heart with heart. We weren't perfect. Life wasn't perfect. But our love was deliberate, enduring, and true. And that was enough. Years of quiet devotion had brought us here, still side by side, still choosing each other, still breathing the same rhythm. It wasn't the kind of love that needed ceremonies or public acknowledgement. It was a love built slowly, deliberately, with patience and honesty as its foundation. That evening, we sat together on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city glow beneath us. The world moved fast below, people rushing, cars honking, lives unfolding in haste. But up here in our small corner, time seemed to stretch and pause. "I've been thinking," he said softly, holding my hand in both of his, "about how far we've come." I turned to look at him. His eyes were steady, warm, reflecting both the past and the future we had chosen together. "We've built something rare," he continued. "Not flashy, not loud, but enduring. And that's worth more than anything the world could offer." I nodded. "I know, and I want to keep building it. Every day, every moment." We reminisced about the small adventures. The first train ride, the quiet cafes, the rain-soaked streets, the shared meals, the notes left for each other, the whispered confessions. Each memory was a brick in the foundation of what we had created. "You've changed me," I said softly, not just with love, but with patience, trust, and presence. He shook his head gently. "No, we changed each other. You showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness, and honesty isn't fragile. We built this together." Later, as the city lights flickered and the night deepened, we didn't speak. Words weren't necessary. The warmth of our hands, the gentle touch of our shoulders, and the quiet rhythm of our breathing conveyed everything. I rested my head on his chest once again, feeling the steady beat of his heart. He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me closer, not possessively, but with the quiet assurance of belonging. In that silence, I realized the ultimate truth. Love isn't measured by grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It is measured by presence, patience, honesty, and the deliberate choice to stay, every day, in small and large ways. And in that moment, I felt complete. Not because the world approved, not because it was perfect, but because we had chosen each other again and again, and we would continue to do so. Years may come and go. Life may bring challenges. The world may continue to whisper doubts and judgments. But we had learned the most important lesson. Love that is deliberate, honest, and patient endures. It is quiet, it is steady, and it is unshakable. As I closed my eyes against his chest, I felt the warmth of fulfillment. A love that began with a shoulder to rest on had grown into a lifetime of shared moments, trust, and unwavering presence. And for the first time in my life, I knew this is home.